Good morning, everyone. My name is Sirazul. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at the European Network on Statelessness. It's a pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of ENS to this webinar, What's Next for Work to Protect the Rights of Stateless Refugees in Europe. For those of you not familiar with ENS, we are a civil society alliance of over 180 organizations and individual experts working to address statelessness in 41 European countries through law and policy development, raising awareness and capacity building. We are excited to have had over 60, 70 people registered to join and participate and join us today. Feel free to say hi to the chat, tell us who you are and why you are joining us from today, so we can find out a bit about our audience. Today, we are celebrating the end of our Stateless Journeys campaign, reflecting on what has been achieved over the last 4 years and what next for work with stateless refugees in Europe. We are recording today's session and we will make it available publicly afterwards, so feel free to share this with your colleagues. There will be an opportunity to put questions to our panelists today, so please use the chat functions to ask questions as we go along. We will be monitoring these and we will try our best to answer as we go along, and if we have the time at the end. If you have any technical issues, we have my colleague Emily providing background support, so please message her if needed. We hope that you will stay engaged beyond today's session, so feel free to email us afterwards with any further questions, comments, or feedback. So the webinar. The aim of today's webinar is to reflect on what has been achieved over the last 4 years through our work with members, partners, affected communities to improve routes to protection for stateless refugees in Europe. We'll be hearing from a series of experts, getting their thoughts on what next for work with stateless refugees in Europe. After we hear from my colleague Nina, our head of policy and research, we will present an overview of the campaign and its impact. We have a fantastic panel of 3 ENS members who have been involved in the campaign, as well as Spain's Justice and Home Affairs Counselor from the Spanish permanent representation to the EU, who will offer their reflection. So it's time to hear from our first speaker, ENS's Head of Policy and Research, Nina Murray. Over to you, Nina, to provide an overview of the campaign and its impact.
Thank you, Sirazul. Thanks very much. And I should just say we actually have Elena Olivares with us and not Luis Thugten, the Justice and Home Affairs Counsellor, as previously advertised. But we're really grateful to have Elena Olivares, who's from the Ministry of Interior in Spain and was formerly chairing the Asylum Working Party under the Spanish presidency of the EU. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Elena, and from all of our speakers. It's great to be here with you this morning. As Sirazul said, I'm Nina Murray, Head of Policy and Research at the European Network on Statelessness, and I've been managing our Stateless Journeys project, our Comment Relief funded project over the last 4 years, the aim of which, as Sirazul said, has been to improve routes to protection for stateless refugees in Europe. So the wider project has involved many of our members in research, capacity building, engagement, advocacy initiatives, both at regional and national levels in a variety of countries, as well as our Stateless Journeys campaign. And the campaign and project work have succeeded in putting statelessness firmly on the agenda, migration and policy agenda, leading to EU and domestic law reforms. And I want to really acknowledge and thank all of our members and partners for their tireless work and efforts to achieve this over the last 4 years. We couldn't have done it without them. In my brief presentation today, I'm just going to reflect on the rationale for the campaign, what's been achieved, and what's next for our work with stateless refugees. I'm just going to briefly share my screen, if bear with me for a second. Hopefully you can see that. Apologies for the, here we go. So first of all, the campaign, the Stateless Journeys campaign. So at the outset of this work back in 2020, we knew from research that we'd carried out with our members that stateless statelessness was posing specific challenges for refugees in Europe at all stages of their journeys. So from the point of errors in how their nationality was being recorded on arrival, impacting in turn on access to protection, on the rights of children, risks of detention, and barriers to inclusion, naturalization, and return. So nationality problems were being overlooked by asylum actors. There was no guidance on how to identify statelessness, few tools to accurately record statelessness, and limited support for stateless people to navigate the complex procedures in which they often found themselves disadvantaged because of their lack of nationality. So despite these challenges, or perhaps a reflection of these challenges, the 2020 proposal for a new pact, EU pact on migration and asylum, statelessness was invisible in the proposals. So to address this, this gap and wider gaps, we set out to engage affected communities and refugee response actors in capacity building, advocacy and campaigning. And you'll hear more about this work from some of our member partners involved in the project shortly. So in short, the campaign and wider project sought to give visibility to the views and the experience and expertise of stateless refugees. It sought to build the capacity of frontline refugee response actors and to reform EU and national domestic law and policy to help facilitate the identification of statelessness and access to protection for stateless migrants and refugees. Apologies, I think you're seeing my Teams chats pop up here. So the context for the campaign was a challenging one. At times, the toxic debates around the pact and the right to asylum in the EU, the general shift to the right in European politics, impact of COVID-19, the conflict in Ukraine, all of these crises effectively impacted on the work. But despite this, our members and partners and wider community tirelessly continued to work adapting to the challenges as they arose. And we have to also thank our donors, Comet Relief, for their flexibility, which in times of crisis helped us, enabled us to continue the work and channel our efforts to where support was most needed on the ground. So as a result, some of the impacts of the campaign, our Stateless Journeys Knowledge Hub now has a host of tools and resources for refugee response actors. Over 2,000 frontline response actors have been trained in the last 4 years by us and our members at national level. We've also worked with the EU Asylum Agency to mainstream statelessness across its tools and training. And most importantly, stateless refugees have shared their experiences and engaged with decision makers to raise awareness and co-develop solutions to the problems identified. And very significantly, following extensive engagement with the European Commission, Council and Parliament, and a welcome push by many of our allies, including the Spanish presidency at the end of last year, the new pact on migration and asylum, as adopted, has incorporated binding provisions for the identification of statelessness for the first time into EU asylum acquis. So whilst we have to recognise and acknowledge that the pact as a whole raises other concerns, much wider concerns about the EU's approach to migration and asylum, it's welcome that some of our calls to address statelessness were heard and incorporated into the instruments that were adopted. So the pact instruments for the first time, as I said, introduce binding provisions around the international legal definition of stateless person. They require member states to identify indications of statelessness, respect their international obligations towards stateless people, and to strengthen protection and access to fundamental rights to avoid discrimination. So it's really important that these are now fully implemented and that statelessness is properly identified in EU asylum systems. So specifically, just before I move on to what next, just very specifically what exactly is in the pact. So my colleagues can share in the chat a briefing that we published on Monday, which outlines exactly what provisions are now in the pact relating to statelessness and our recommendations for implementation. In short, the screening regulation, the asylum procedures regulation, the Asylum Migration Management Regulation and Eurodac Regulation all contain specific provisions relating to statelessness. We have in screening, APR and AMMR, the international legal definition of a stateless person. As part of new vulnerability checks at screening, indications of statelessness need to be identified. And the APR and AMMR both remind member states in their recitals of the need to respect their international obligations to stateless people. And there's more detail on this in the briefing that you can access online. There are, of course, still gaps and concerns regarding the pact, which we outline in our briefing, but let's now turn our focus to what this means for stateless refugees in Europe and what's next. So implementation of the new pact provisions will require us to work with our members and partners to monitor, to influence and ensure full implementation. Member states will need comprehensive tools to support identification and recording of statelessness, dissemination of resources and training for frontline actors, as well as better data collection mechanisms. We will continue to strongly advocate for member states and states beyond the EU to introduce dedicated statelessness determination procedures to ensure that all displaced stateless people can access protection and realise their rights as a consequence of their statelessness being identified. Currently 6 EU member states have dedicated procedures and others have partial procedures or are in the process of introducing procedures. But we and our members, we need resourcing to build on this momentum achieved to date and sustain this vital work that we're already doing. Statelessness experts, including stateless refugees themselves, are best placed to support this and must play a role going forwards, but we can't do this without funding, without resourcing. We need to also remember the role of states beyond the EU who can exchange with their peers and share good practice relating to identification and determination, to raise standards across the region. And the wider global context is an important one as well, following the prominence of statelessness at the last Global Refugee Forum and the launch of the Global Alliance to End Statelessness, which will take place later this year. I'm coming to the end, apologies, Sirazul. So in summary, a lot has been achieved over the last 4 years, in large part down to the tireless work of our members, partners, communities, and you're going to hear about some of that work very, very soon. But we can't be complacent. We have to build on this momentum and capitalise on recent progress to push for that wider reform that's needed. We'll be closely monitoring implementation of the pact provisions. We'll also be continuing to monitor Europe's response to displacement from Ukraine to ensure people who lack proof of their links to Ukraine can access protection. And all of this requires resources. So it's really important that that work to develop tools, to engage with communities, build capacity, is resourced, and those changes on paper translate into improvements in the lives of stateless people in Europe. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or suggestions, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you. Thank you, Nina. That was quite informative. Now let's turn to our panel of invited experts to hear the reflection, responses, and recommendations for the way forward. First, we are going to hear from Valeria Ilareva, head lawyer and chairperson of Foundation for Access to Rights in Bulgaria. FAR has been involved in the Stateless Journeys work from the outset. Valeria, please.
Thank you very much, Sirazul. Hello, dear colleagues. As Sirazul introduced me, my name is Valeria Ilareva. I serve as the chairperson of the Foundation for Access to Rights, FAR, in Bulgaria. FAR is a member of the European Network on Statelessness ever since we founded the organization in 2013. Actually, it is one of the first actions that we took as we already provided legal aid to stateless persons in Bulgaria. Within the Stateless Journeys initiatives, FAR carried out participatory action research in Bulgaria with regard to children who are either stateless or at risk of statelessness. We documented our casework in the cases of several families, 2 of them involving single mothers with their children. What we did was to identify key systemic issues. We sought strategic solutions to them, and we dedicated a lot of time to hear the persons concerned. Among other things, we gathered evidence for evidence-based advocacy. In one of the cases, for example, we managed to pave the way for the first time in Bulgaria to actually implement the legal provision according to which a child that is born to stateless parents on Bulgarian territory is considered a Bulgarian national. We have that provision in Bulgarian law, but there had been no procedural pathway how to implement it. In the case of a Palestinian child from the Gaza Strip, the Bulgarian court made a preliminary ruling request before the Court of Justice of the European Union. The case concerns the humanitarian situation in Gaza, UNRWA's assistance there, and the application of the refugee definition to a child from the Gaza Strip. The case is ever more topical nowadays. Its number is C-563 from the year 2022, and the judgment is scheduled to be pronounced on the 13th of June, so very soon. Another Stateless Journeys initiative in which we have taken part is the development of a national toolkit to identify and to address statelessness in Bulgaria. It serves as a comprehensive guide to identify statelessness, to prevent statelessness, and to protect stateless persons in Bulgaria. It is very valuable that this toolkit will be available also in Bulgarian language. So it will serve as a helpful tool for practitioners and for policymakers. FAR will disseminate the toolkit through its network of contacts, through its newsletter. We also plan to dedicate a session on the toolkit as part of the legal clinic. We are establishing a legal clinic on socio-economic inclusion of refugees in Bulgaria. We are launching it this year with the support of UNHCR. The toolkit can also serve as a valuable resource on the basis of which to organize trainings in the future. And from this, I would like to move on. What's next? What do we see as necessary in the future? In the first place, at FAR, we believe that it is very important to do trainings and awareness raising on the statelessness issues. In the first place, identification of statelessness is really the key for further access to rights. We continue our legal casework, the legal aid provision to stateless persons. And in that context, for us, strategic litigation is very important. Currently, FAR is leading 2 pending cases of stateless persons before the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. We also provide legal aid in another case besides the one of the Palestinian child, in another case of an adult, an undocumented migrant in Bulgaria, who has been in the country for 29 years now, without the possibility, however, to renew his national passport. Thus, he is in a legal limbo in Bulgaria, and the Sofia City Administrative Court made a preliminary ruling request before the Court of Justice of the European Union, inquiring on the compatibility of this legal limbo situation with the right to respect for one's human dignity, which is enshrined in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. If you're also interested in that case, its number is 352 from the year 2023. I will conclude with reiterating that hearing the voices of stateless persons should remain a key principle in our work. More concretely, in Bulgaria this year, UNHCR and FAR are planning to carry out a statelessness survey involving the beneficiaries of FAR in focus groups in order for us to listen to what stateless persons have to say with regard to the causes of statelessness and the needs of stateless persons in Bulgaria. We are very grateful to ENS for providing us with the tools and for with a momentum to keep up with the work that we do. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Valeria. That was quite helpful. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Aleksandra Semeriak, ENS trustee, member of Apatride Network and Statefree, and formerly stateless person. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sirazul, and thank you very much, ENS, for inviting me to this session, and good morning to all participants. As Sirazul was mentioning, or Nina was mentioning also at the beginning, the Stateless Journey campaign has worked on the regional level, but also has had practices on the local or national level. So I will be focusing my intervention mainly on the development of the campaign in the context of Spain. Previously to the start of the Stateless Journey project working campaign, some of us members of ENS based in Spain already had the opportunity to work together on the Statelessness Index, which is a very useful tool, and which provided us with a clear picture on the status quo in the country regarding the access to rights and nationality for stateless persons. Yet the Stateless Journey campaign gave us also the opportunity, or as Valeria was saying, the momentum to do something and try to change that status quo. As we are based in Spain, one of the main entry points to the European Union for asylum seekers, refugees, and stateless persons, we were driven by our commitment to ensure that stateless refugees arriving in Spain have effective access to their rights. So in 2021, we began to explore possible opportunities for statewide collaboration on the campaign, inspired by other efforts on the regional level led by ENS. We established regular meetings to adjust the campaign to the specificities of Spain and to determine also possible awareness-raising activities, social and political advocacy actions, and as well to carry out training on statelessness that was focusing specifically on the context of Spain, and to introduce community engagement work in the country. Our coalition represents, I would say, a unique form of cooperation between the non-governmental and the community sectors, because it includes member organizations with a wide experience on international protection, legal experts on statelessness and on the right to a nationality, stateless activists, and stateless-led organizations who represent one of the main stateless communities in Spain, which is the Sahrawi community. This diversity has enhanced our ability to address statelessness from multiple perspectives and to strengthen our advocacy efforts. And as part of our work within the campaign, we have developed a statement and a policy brief calling for the reform of the regulation governing the determination of the statelessness status in Spain. The goal of this recommendation is to ensure that the protection needs of stateless applicants are met from a human rights perspective, and that the issue of statelessness is understood as a relevant matter and as an intersectional matter. And through these recommendations and the application of those recommendations to address effectively statelessness by those who work in the international protection system, aiming at least that the rights of those recognized as stateless are the same as the rights of those recognized as refugees. Another cornerstone of our localized campaign was community engagement through two steps: the active participation of persons with lived experience of statelessness in designing related actions and decision-making processes, as through the coalition itself, but also by providing opportunities out of the coalition. And second, to the empowerment of stateless individuals by providing a safe platform for them to share their stories, to share their experiences, achievements, and their challenges. Although these can be seen as separate actions, we would like to highlight that the legislative and political changes to recognize stateless individuals as citizens with full rights cannot occur without the invaluable insights and perspectives of those directly affected by statelessness. These stories of individuals, which you can also find on the Desplazamientos Apátridas website, like Salka's, Ali's, Mustafa's, or Mohammed's stories, vividly illustrate the significant challenges that stateless refugees face in their daily lives in Spain, and why persons with lived experience need to be part not only of the conversation, but also of the decision-making process. And we have used any possible opportunity to underscore this necessity. We first had the opportunity to introduce our work in 2022 in the launch of the campaign in Brussels. And I would say as part of the results of the discussions on change and action inspired by stateless changemakers and civil society, we realized that the need to continue working on providing support and communication and active listening and understanding among all the actors that are involved is meant to be through addressing the existing misconceptions in the narrative on statelessness through a collaborative and holistic approach. So the narratives that we are used to need to be reviewed through the participation of those with lived experience in reshaping these misconceptions. Last year in June, at the Pan-Regional Conference in Madrid on addressing statelessness in Europe, we were not only able to present the advances of our work and the achievements, such as promoting concrete action, establishing effective communication channels with national stakeholders, engaging with key actors in the field of asylum, and enhancing the effective participation of persons with lived experience in these kind of spaces. The conference also gathered together high-level decision makers from different Spanish ministries and provided space for interaction and advocacy led by the coalition and by stateless communities themselves. As for example, through the panel dedicated specifically to statelessness in Spain and its impact concretely on the Sahrawi community. We would like to think that the impact of such initiatives has impulsed Spain to promote the inclusion of statelessness in the new Pact on Migration and Asylum under its presidency, and the pledges that Spain made during the Global Refugee Forum to join the Global Alliance to End Statelessness, as well as to reform the statelessness regulation. And as we are still facing human rights violations at the borders and important differences in access to procedures and reception conditions between refugees and stateless persons, we look forward to the next steps, and these will be my final thoughts. To continue providing inclusive spaces for those with lived experience, to ensure that stateless communities participate in the discussions and in the decision-making process, to advocate for the necessary political and legislative reforms with a specific focus in Spain on improving and reducing the time to access nationality, to build capacity for the actors involved in the international protection system in Spain to mainstream statelessness, especially for the identification of the risk of statelessness and the determination of nationality in the asylum applications, to continue raise awareness and to expand the good practices that we have in Spain and share them with other European stakeholders. And we want to believe that our work is a testament of the power of collaborative action, and we are looking forward to continue building strong communication among the different layers of politics and stateless communities towards our common goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Aleksandra, and that was a brilliant note to end off on. And my colleague Alexia has put the links in the chat for the campaign in Spain. So next, we're going to hear from Thugten, the president of the Association of Bhutanese Communities in Denmark, who got involved more recently in the Stateless Journeys campaign to make a film about his communities and to carry out advocacy in Denmark with support from ENS and its network. Over to you, Thugten.
Thank you, Sirazul. Namaste. Greetings to you all from Denmark. As Sirazul introduced, I am Thugten Drupka, President of the Association of Bhutanese Communities in Denmark, ABC Denmark. I am here today to share our lived experiences of statelessness, what we do, and our involvement in ENS as a member organization. ABC Denmark is a community-based non-profit organization of resettled Bhutanese refugees in Denmark. We primarily work to preserve and promote Bhutanese culture and values while helping the Bhutanese community integrate into Danish society. There are around 1,100 Bhutanese community members in Denmark. It has been over 30 years since we became stateless refugees after being evicted from Bhutan in the early 1990s. Before coming to Denmark, we lived in refugee camps in Nepal. We wanted to return to Bhutan, but Bhutan refused to take us back, and Nepal denied local integration. To resolve the long-standing Bhutanese refugee crisis in Nepal, UNHCR initiated a third country resettlement program in 2007. From 2008 to 15, we got the opportunity to resettle in Denmark as UN quota refugees. Over 100,000 Bhutanese refugees were resettled in 7 other countries: the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Norway, and the Netherlands. Initially, we were very happy, grateful, and enthusiastic to start a new life in Denmark. We hoped to rebuild our lives and eventually end our statelessness by acquiring Danish citizenship. However, as time passed, we realized that most of our people could not obtain citizenship in Denmark due to strict naturalization laws and prevailing illiteracy among our elderly community members. Until last year, only 17 individuals out of 845 initially resettled had successfully obtained Danish citizenship. Most of our elderly illiterate members may never obtain citizenship unless they are given direct or easy access to it. We are continuously addressing this statelessness issue by creating awareness, sharing our stories to garner public and institutional support, preparing documentation, and appealing to the government. Last April, we published our statistical data report online, detailing everything about us. It has helped us a lot as a document to make people, other organizations, and authorities understand our statelessness situation clearly. We appeal to the Danish government through an open letter to address our statelessness issue and gain media coverage. In March 2023, we joined ENS as associate members, and since then, we have had the opportunity to participate in the ENS Stateless Journeys campaign. In this campaign, Lokmaya, one of our community members, is featured in an 8-minute short film. It shows the everyday challenges faced by 54-year-old illiterate Lokmaya in Denmark as she endeavors to obtain citizenship. This story represents the desperate struggle of illiterate Bhutanese refugees in Denmark to obtain citizenship. You can watch it on ENS YouTube channel as well. Following this video project with ENS, on November 27, 2023, we organized a public event panel discussion in Copenhagen with support from Danish Refugee Councils and the Danish Institute for Human Rights. Yen from ENS also attended the event. The event was a huge success, giving us better visibility for our statelessness issue. Representatives from UNHCR, the Naturalization Committee, the Danish Refugee Council, the Danish Institute for Human Rights, and I were among the panelists. Around 90 individuals and representatives from various organizations and authorities attended the event. Following this event, Also, with the support of Danish refugee councils, we had the opportunity to present our statelessness issue to the Naturalization Committee on December 14th, 2023. ENS covered our travel expenses for both of these events. Further, ENS connected us with the Commissioner for Human Rights of Council of Europe, who sent their report to the Danish government with recommendations to address our issue. UNHCR is also supporting our work recently and has assured us that they will recommend special dispensation for elderly illiterate people to the Danish government. Although we haven't yet succeeded in creating a significant impact or noticeable results, it is worth mentioning that the Danish government has noted the illiteracy issues within the Bhutanese community. They have stated that they will consider citizenship applications individually, evaluating contribution to Danish society through employment. Thank you, ENS, for your support in empowering us, financially supporting us, making us part of your Stateless Journeys campaign, and advocating for the rights of stateless people. Our involvement in ENS has been immensely beneficial. ENS has acted as a consultant for us, connecting us with various organizations, institutions, NGOs, and INGOs. Our statelessness issue is now more visible than ever in Denmark. We will continue to work for the citizenship rights of our community members in Denmark. By doing so, we hope that others in similar situations can also benefit. We have some ongoing and planned projects. We will keep advocating for change. We are determined to end our statelessness in Denmark. This is it from me for now. If you have any questions, please let me know. We are always willing to share our stories and ready to collaborate. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Thugten. And as Thugten mentioned, both the interview and the video that they did are linked in the chat. So please do have a look at them when you get the time. So on to our next expert. I'm delighted now to introduce Elena Olivares, who is currently Deputy Director General for Institutional Relations and Information on International Protection in the Government of Spain. Elena was formerly Home Affairs Counselor at Spain's permanent representation to the EU and chaired the EU Asylum Working Party during Spain's presidency of the EU in the second half of 2023. And as Nina mentioned, we are grateful for Elena for stepping in last minute for Louise, who had an urgent engagement. So over to you, Elena.
Thank you very much. Yes, hello everyone. I'm sorry that Luis cannot be here, but he has an agenda commitment. Yes, now I'm working as Deputy Director for Institutional Relations and Information about International Protection here in Spain, the Spanish Asylum Office, which is the body in charge of the statelessness applications here in Spain. And yes, formally I was part of the Spanish team, which was negotiating over the pact under the Spanish presidency. For the Spanish presidency, statelessness was a priority for two main reasons. First of all, as I just said, because we were in charge of the negotiations of the pact. And as leading from the council in these regulations, we have a main commitment with statelessness, but also because Spain has a quite big community of statelessness people. As for example, in 2023, we received more than 900 applications, and the recognition rate was almost 95%, mainly due to the Sahrawi community, which was already mentioned by Aleksandra. Having this framework and working together with the European network of statelessness, statelessness was introduced during the Spanish presidency in two main areas. First of all, in the Asylum Working Party, which I was chairing, and also during the negotiations. So regarding the Asylum Working Party, we try to use this forum to provide some kind of visibility to this topic. We also share the main conclusions of the Madrid conference, as Aleksandra also mentioned. In the Asylum Working Party, it was twice in the agenda, and we have three main points, three main conclusions: the identification, the regulation, and the operative support. Regarding identification, we achieved some kind of conclusions also. First of all, the moment of the identification of a statelessness situation was very different among the member states, as it could be identified in the arriving at the member state, when the application of international protection was made, or even when applying for residence or nationality. This means that there were different authorities involved in the statelessness recognitions, from the border guards to regular administrative authorities or immigration authorities. Regarding regulation, what was shown in the Asylum Working Party is that there were not an homogeneous situation among the member states, mainly because there were not the countries like Spain that we have a special regulation or procedure for getting the recognition of the statelessness status was not the mainstream. Normally, member states have tried to identify statelessness through the nationality procedures, where the conclusion was that non-nationality was found. That was the case, for example, in the Netherlands or in Croatia. And getting some kind of flexibility to get the nationality of the member states in the cases where they found that the situation of the person was statelessness. And finally, regarding the operative support, we found that it was very needed in the different member states, mainly for providing some kind of visibility and focus the activity in the statelessness, and that this operative support was provided by UNHCR mainly, and by the EUAA, which provides some kind of training for this kind of authorities. Through the negotiations, we try to introduce, to introduce the statelessness in the different texts. As it has been said before, the definition was introduced, and in different legal instrument, and also the possibility to all the statelessness persons to access to the international protection system. However, one of the main problems that we found, it was because we tried to use the screening regulation to have not only the possibility to, after the screening, go to the return procedure or to the international protection procedure, but also to the statelessness procedure. However, due to the main fact that not only the member states, not all the member states has this kind of procedure, it was not possible to introduce in the regulation. But it was quite discussed, and it provided a good visibility to the negotiations among the member states and with the European Parliament. The main conclusions during the Spanish presidency, mainly during the Asylum Working Party, it was first of all that, of course, the statelessness was included, not as much as we wanted, but it was included in the legal instruments of the pact, but also that statelessness was back in the conversations. It was quite a good topic to discuss during the Asylum Working Party, where some members, like for example Bulgaria, came to us saying that it was a very interesting topic to be discussed. So I cannot but encourage new presidencies to keep on going with this topic, as it was very well received by the member states. Regarding the pact implementation, now this is the moment where we are now. The pact it was finally approved, and the test was published just a few days before today. We have two main elements now. We have the timing and we have the following steps. The timing, of course, the pact is going to be in force in just a few days, 20 days from the publication, but it's going to be applied in 2 years. So we have 2 years to keep on working in getting better procedures inside the member states, and we need this kind of elements that we are now working on. So mainly the common implementation plan that is going to be presented by the Commission. We believe that it's going to be presented the 12th of June, and then we have to work in our national implementation plans. So, for example, in the case of Spain, we are already working in this kind of national implementation plans. We do really think that this is a moment to improve the statelessness procedures, as all the better we have, all the best we have the procedures in every member state, is going to be the better. Yes, these are the main conclusions for time that I have. Thank you very much for having me, and of course, sorry, but for not having Luis, but he will be in the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you for your contributions. Now we'll bring back Nina just to summarize and talk about next steps for ENS's work. Nina, please.
And thanks to all of our speakers for those really interesting and rich interventions. And it's great to hear more about the work of our members and partners on the ground, both at national level and also in terms of the sort of insider information about the discussions around the pact, which is always really, really interesting. And thanks, Elena, for talking about the outcome of screening, which is definitely a key area of concern for us, and something that we'll be continuing to work on in terms of influencing the introduction of statelessness determination procedures or improvement of existing ones, as you say, which we see as really key, and particularly in that context of what happens after screening. If there are no procedures to access, we could end up with situations where stateless people are facing cycles of sort of attempted and failed return, or risk of detention that could become unlawful. So it's we see it as a really critical point at which to advocate for access to existing procedures and introduction of procedures where they don't exist yet, to ensure that people can access their rights under the 1954 Convention. So it's clear that whilst we've seen lots of impact and success, there's still lots to be done. We've heard a lot about the importance of community engagement, the involvement of people with lived experience of statelessness, the importance of providing those inclusive spaces for exchange and co-developing solutions. So that work, again, I say it often, requires resourcing and time and capacity. So we hope that there is scope amongst donors to continue to resource that important work. And to sort of see the fruits of that power of collaborative action. And at ENS, we'll certainly be continuing to channel resources where we can to our members, to engage with our community group of individuals and representatives of affected communities, to co-develop solutions and ensure that stateless people can claim power as leaders of change. In terms of practical implementation of the pact, we'll also be continuing to develop and roll out toolkits to support the identification of statelessness. As Valeria mentioned, we've been working with FAR which is soon to be published, a toolkit for Bulgaria. We already have one for Czechia, and we have toolkits for Turkey, Romania, and Germany in the pipeline, and we're currently fundraising to be able to do more. So we really hope that those will support those new obligations of states to identify statelessness in the asylum context in the EU. I'm going to stop there. I think we have a couple of questions that have come up in the chat, so I'll hand back to Sirazul to direct some of those to panelists.
Thank you, Nina. And again, thank you to all our speakers. So we do have time for a few questions, and thank you to everyone putting these questions. So the first one I'll direct to Valeria, which says, how do bureaucratic hurdles and lack of documentation exacerbate plight of stateless refugees? And yeah, if you can keep the response to under a minute and a half, I'd be really grateful because we do have a few questions to get through.
I relate this question with the burden of proof in the statelessness determination procedure, which is one of the biggest challenges to identify statelessness, even when you have a statelessness determination procedure in the law, because when you're stateless, you are expected to prove a negative fact, a fact that does not exist, that you are not a citizen of any state. So this is indeed one of the biggest challenges. That's why we need trainings and awareness raising, that for stateless persons, we have to have a different approach when it comes to proving something in an administrative procedure.
Thank you, Valeria. Onto our next question, I think. This one's aimed at Nina, which says, how can the EU's common asylum system be improved to address needs of stateless refugees? Nina.
Great question, and I think this goes back to a lot of the advocacy and analysis we were doing around the pact. So you can find, if you're interested, if colleagues, if they haven't already shared, our original analysis and recommendations of the 2020 pact proposal, which included a comprehensive set of recommendations of how to improve EU asylum acquis to better address statelessness. So it included recommendations around better identification, but also around routes to protection, what we were just discussing about the outcome of screening. So that would be a good place to look. Thank you, Alexa, for posting that. But basically, one of the key things that we were advocating for is more visibility for statelessness, so that there's more awareness. So we have now got that in the asylum acquis, which is great. But as Elena was also alluding to, there's still more work to be done. So we see the need to have better referrals to ensure that people's statelessness can, after being identified, can then be determined at an appropriate point in international protection procedures. So obviously the primacy of any asylum claim is important because determining statelessness requires contact with states with which the person has a link. So it's important that their asylum claim is resolved first, but at an appropriate point in proceedings, it's important that a person's statelessness is determined so that they can then be officially recognised and granted rights that they're due under the 54 Convention. So those areas there's still more to be done there, but we've definitely seen some strong progress with the new provisions that are in the Pact. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nina, for keeping to time. And as Nina said, Alexia did put the link to the pact and analysis and recommendation. It's in the chat, so please do have a read. And then another question about communities, and this one's aimed at Thugten, which is, how can host communities be better engaged to support inclusion of stateless refugees? So over to you, Thugten, please.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah. What was the question?
Yeah, the question was about talking about communities. So our viewers are asking, how can host communities be better engaged to support inclusion of stateless refugees?
Yeah. Where is it? The question? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll just put that for you in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. It should be in the chat. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it now. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. We are highly affected community, so we are trying our best to do what we can. For that, we're trying to create awareness, try to share our stories to different individuals, to other organizations, institutions, government, approaching in different way. This way, we're just trying our best. We are not expert, and our community in Denmark, like when we got opportunity to come to Denmark, we were handpicked by Danish government, and vulnerable group of people were among those people. So we are not expert on it. We're just communicating with other people, getting ideas and trying to do our best. I don't know, like I don't think I have quite explained it good, but it is just from our community that we are jointly working together to fight for it.
That's fine. Thank you, Thugten. No, that's very helpful to know as well. And again, we do have a few more questions, so just a flag, we will run over by 5 minutes. And yeah, it's for questions. So thank you for joining to everyone. And yeah, I've got another question, and this one's aimed at Elena. It's in the chat as well, and what it's asking is if whether Elena can tell us anything about whether Spain's recent recognition of Palestine as a state will have any impact on recognition of Palestinians as stateless in Spain, given the ongoing challenges of occupation and lack of control of borders and documents.
Thank you very much for the question. For the time being, I don't have about that because this is quite new for us. Recognition was yesterday, but it's an element to be taken into account for the next month. For the moment, I can assure that the Palestinian received international protection in Spain. So yeah, maybe it's going to be one of the elements for the future, because it opens a different scenario to analyze.
Thank you, Elena. And last but not least, a question directed to Aleksandra. And it's asking, what role do international organizations and NGOs play in protecting the rights of stateless refugees?
A question that needs more than 1 minute, I guess, to answer. But the role of international organizations and NGOs, be it international NGOs or those acting on a national level, is key to providing those spaces for participation that we were speaking about also previously with the example of Spain. It's also a platform for learning and training. So there has been a lot of improvement and expansion in the number of organizations and the expertise of organizations focusing on refugee rights, but it's important to also mainstream statelessness into these actions and understand it as an intersectional matter, as I was mentioning previously. So using the platforms where these international organizations participate in order to train on statelessness and introduce statelessness into the existing procedures. But then finally, I would say also the importance of these actors for community building and engagement, many of these organizations, if they're focusing on refugee rights, might also have members that are stateless, and it's important that their participation is not just a mere presence, but an effective participation in the discussions and in the planning of activities, awareness-raising activities, advocacy activities. So they are allies in these joint efforts in improving the rights and access to rights for stateless refugees and stateless communities in general. Thank you.
Thank you for that very concise explanation. I know it's quite hard to do under a minute. So that brings us up to the closing of our session. And if I can just ask our speakers to put their cameras on so we can do our final thanks. Yeah, thank you. So thank you for all your contributions today and to our listeners for their questions in the Q&A. We will be posting a quick survey shortly to get your feedback on the webinar. So please do take a minute or two to complete that for us, and we would be grateful. That's yeah, I can see the survey on my screen, so that means everyone should be able to see it as well. And I'll give you just a minute whilst you do that. Thank you to everyone. And it's clear that we need to now build momentum created by the Stateless Journeys campaign to continue to improve routes to protection for stateless refugees. For our part at ENS, we are actively fundraising to continue this work as a priority going forward. We encourage you all to access the tools and resources created through the project and use them in your work. And please do send us any comments, feedback, or questions. Thank you very much to all our panelists for sharing your insights and expertise, and to our members and partners for your tireless commitment to addressing the issue we talked about today. Thank you to all of the participants who joined us today. Thank you. Goodbye.